Picture this: a world tour that sold out across North America and Europe within hours of going on sale, a sitting president of Mexico personally calling South Korea's head of state to beg for extra shows, and 2 slots every single night where not even the performers themselves know what song is coming next. The BTS ARIRANG World Tour 2026 is the largest K-pop stadium tour ever mounted. 82 shows, 34 cities, 23 countries, running from Goyang to Manila across nearly a full calendar year. Bloomberg reported it before a single date was announced. Industry analysts estimated the comeback would generate at least 2.9 trillion Korean, roughly $1.93 billion, a figure that puts it in direct conversation with Taylor Swift's Eras Tour earnings. But the numbers are the easy part. What most people aren't talking about are the specific decisions, the behind-the-scenes realities, and the individual moments involving each member that reveal exactly what this tour actually is underneath the pyrotechnics and the sold-out stadiums. 7 members, 7 facts, some of them hiding in plain sight, others buried in the production details that casual observers completely missed. The question isn't whether BTS came back. The question is what, specifically, they brought back with them, and what that means for every army standing in those stadiums right now. Number 7. The surprise song system, Jungkook. Here is something that separates the ARIRANG World Tour from virtually every other major stadium run happening right now. 2 spots in the setlist every single night are reserved for surprise songs, and they are a surprise to BTS just as much as they are to ARMY. Not a curated surprise, not a pre-rehearsed throwback slipped in to feel spontaneous. The members genuinely do not know which songs from their back catalog will be called until they are standing on that stage. And Jungkook is the reason this detail matters more than it might sound on paper. Each night of the tour includes 2 rotating surprise tracks drawn from the back catalog. The pool of eligible songs spans over a decade of BTS history tracks that haven't been performed in years, choreography that has to be executed from muscle memory alone, because there is no time to rehearse what you didn't know was coming. For Jungkook, who serves as the group's main vocalist and is also one of its most technically demanding performers, this system puts a specific kind of pressure on full display. In Tokyo, the surprise slots pulled Save Me and Crystal Snow on night 1, then Dope and For You on night 2, songs from completely different eras, completely different vocal registers, completely different choreographic demands. Jungkook has been the lead vocalist on 6 of the title tracks from the ARIRANG album itself, including Swim, Body to Body, Hooligan, Aliens, FYA, and 2. That is already an enormous vocal workload across a 2.5 to 3 hour show. Then add the variable of an unannounced song that could demand anything from a high-register ballad to a full-intensity hip-hop performance. What makes this visible is what happened in Goyang on night 2. During DNA, BTS attempted to deliver the choreography despite it being completely unplanned, and things devolved into lighthearted, glorious chaos. That moment was not a production failure. It was the system working exactly as designed because the point is not a flawless performance of a surprise song. The point is a genuine, unrepeatable moment that happens differently every single night, in every single city, for every single army in that stadium. No 2 nights on this tour are identical. The confirmed surprise songs so far have included Microcosmos, I Need You, Take 2, DNA, Spring Day, Run, Save Me, Crystal Snow, Dope, For You, Magic Shop, Permission to Dance, Pied Piper, Boy with Love, Life Goes On, Baepsae, and on. That is a list covering releases from 2015 all the way through 2022. The oldest song on that list is 11 years old. The choreography for some of those tracks was built for a completely different version of these 7 people, younger, less seasoned, performing in venues a fraction of the size of the stadiums they are filling now. The fact that they can pull any of it out on 0 notice in front of tens of thousands of people in a 360-degree stage configuration where every section of the crowd has a direct sightline to what is happening is a specific kind of competence that does not get discussed enough in conversations about what BTS actually is as a live act. Jungkook's voice has to land clean on songs he may not have sung in 3, 4, or even 7 years. Tampa Night 1 drew Permission to Dance, first time performed since 2022, and Magic Shop, which had not been performed since 2019. 7 years off a song, then back on stage with it in front of a full stadium. That is not something you can fake, and the crowd knows it. Number 6. The 360 degree stage nobody had done before, J-Hope. The stage features a full 360 degree in-the-round setup, a first for any K-pop stadium tour, putting BTS at the center of the audience for every single show. That single sentence sounds like a production detail. It is actually a complete reimagining of how a stadium concert functions, and J-Hope is the member whose specific role makes it the most consequential decision on this entire tour. To understand why, you need to understand what a traditional stadium stage looks like. In virtually every major world tour running right now, the stage sits at one end of the venue. The floor section and the lower bowl face it directly. The upper sections on the sides get an angled view. The sections behind the stage get almost nothing. They are the cheap seats for a reason, because the performance is fundamentally oriented away from them. BTS eliminated that entirely. The Army Bomb lightstick syncs live with the 360 degree production, meaning the lighting design accounts for every single section of a stadium simultaneously, treating the entire venue as one unified performance space, rather than a room with a front and a back. Now, here is where J-Hope becomes the central figure in this conversation. His choreography, direction, and stage presence propelled BTS's comeback live performance to another level, bringing high energy as well as artistic pizzazz to BTS's live performances. Choreography designed for a traditional stage has a front. It has a direction. The performers face forward, the big moments land toward the main camera line, and the people behind the stage see backs and profiles. Choreography designed for a 360 degree stage has no front. Every formation, every transition, every movement sequence has to work from all angles simultaneously, which means J-Hope, as the member most credited with shaping the physical language of this tour's performances, was working against an entirely different set of geometric constraints than any previous BTS choreographer had faced. The 360 degree stage made way for multiple large catwalks that extended from the stage, encompassed by pyrotechnics, walls of flame, and thousands of LED lights. Those catwalks are not decorative. They are functional solutions to a spatial problem. How do you bring the performance physically closer to sections of the crowd that are not adjacent to the main platform when the main platform is an island in the center of the stadium? The catwalks extend outward from that central island, giving members paths to move through the crowd rather than simply performing toward it. Even before the official kickoff, melodies of Geajiam, a traditional 1-2, stringed zither, filled the venue alongside VCR visuals evoking ink-wash paintings. That pre-show environment was not accidental. It was a deliberate tonal calibration, setting the cultural register of the ARIRANG album before a single performer stepped onto the stage. The production company behind the physical stage design built by Guy Carrington and Florian Weider described the structure as inspired by the concept of a picture frame, grounding the show in the modern energy of BTS, while simultaneously honoring the historical and cultural significance of the album's themes. J-Hope's contribution sits inside all of that infrastructure. The choreography has to breathe inside a picture frame that has no edges, no wings to exit into, no upstage to retreat toward, no downstage to push toward for the climactic moment. Every direction is equally the front. What that demands from a choreographer is a completely different kind of spatial thinking. The comeback concert in Seoul was directed by Hamish Hamilton, the British director renowned for his work on the Super Bowl halftime show and the Oscars, who described the production as being among the most challenging in terms of sheer logistical complexity. The fact that Hamilton, whose entire career has been built on directing massive, technically complex live events, called this specific production challenging, is worth sitting with. J-Hope built the movement language that Hamilton's cameras then had to capture from every direction at once. That is a collaboration between two people operating at the absolute ceiling of what live performance production currently looks like anywhere in the world. Not just in K-pop. Anywhere. Number 5. The album that took 4 years to write, Suga. The album, ARIRANG, was released on the 20th of March 2026 and features 14 songs, the most new BTS material released at once since February 2020. That gap is not a coincidence, and it is not purely explained by military service. It is the direct result of a creative process that began before the members even enlisted, carried forward through solo work done individually while separated, and assembled into a group album only after all 7 were back in the same room. Suga is the reason this particular detail belongs in a conversation about the tour rather than just the album. Not only is Suga's musical talent on display on the new album, but he is a phenomenal lyricist, contributing greatly to what many have called Aryan, a more rap-oriented album going back to their roots. BTS have showcased a more mature hip-hop version of themselves from their rookie years. The word roots is doing a lot of work in that sentence. BTS debuted in 2013 as a hip-hop group under BigHit Entertainment. Over the following decade, their sound expanded dramatically pop, R&B, electronic, orchestral, psychedelic rock. The ARIRANG album does not abandon any of that evolution. What it does is reintroduce the lyrical density and genre grounding that defined their earliest work, now filtered through the perspective of 7 people who spent years apart, processing experiences that no previous BTS album had the raw material to address. Suga's enlistment was among the most closely followed of the 7 members, in part because he enlisted while recovering from shoulder surgery he underwent in 2023. He was discharged in June 2024. The period between that discharge and the album's March 2026 release gave him roughly 20 months to contribute to the record, but those 20 months came after years of solo output under his alias Agus D, including a solo world tour of his own in 2023, that had already established a distinct artistic identity separate from his BTS work. Hitmakers contributing to Airing include Podog, Mike Will Made It, Flume, Ryan Tedder, and GHST Loop, among others. That collaborator list spans Atlanta trap production, Australian electronic music, Grammy-winning pop songwriting, and underground beat construction. For Suga, whose production instincts have always leaned toward genre fusion and lyrical precision, working within a collaborator framework that wide requires a specific kind of editorial discipline, knowing which external voices serve the album's thesis and which pull it off course. The album's title is inspired by the culturally sentimental and timeless folk song Arirang, believed to have originated during at least the Joseon dynasty, dating back to 1392 and coming in hundreds of regional variations across Korea. Suga, choosing to anchor a hip-hop forward album to a folk song that is effectively Korea's unofficial national anthem, is a conceptual move that requires the kind of cultural confidence that only comes from having thought about it for a very long time. It is not a surface-level reference. The traditional song, Arirang, has historically been sung during periods of separation, longing, and return themes that map directly onto what each of these 7 members actually lived through during their time apart. For Suga specifically, who has been the most consistently autobiographical writer in the group across his entire career, including his landmark 2020 mixtape that addressed mental health and personal history with unusual directness for a K-pop release, the subject matter of this album is not abstract. The album announcement stated it was driven by each member's honest introspection. That phrase, honest introspection, is a very specific creative brief. It means the album is not constructed around a concept or a visual universe or a marketing narrative. It is constructed around what actually happened to 7 real people during 4 years of mandatory military service, individual creative careers, personal growth, and the particular weight of knowing that hundreds of millions of people were waiting for them to come back. Suga wrote inside that pressure. The tour is now performing the result of it, night after night, in stadiums on 5 continents. That is a long road from a mixtape recorded in a bedroom. Number 4. The letter that started everything, Jin. Before there were billboards in Times Square, before the tour dates were announced, before a single ticket went on sale, BTS began their comeback in classic fashion by telling ARMY first. Handwritten letters were delivered to the homes of selected fans, thanking them for their support as well as telling them the news. That detail sits quietly inside the larger machinery of one of the biggest entertainment comebacks of the decade, and it points directly to Jin, the member whose return carried a specific emotional weight that no marketing campaign could have manufactured, because the facts of his service alone were already the story. Jin was the first of the 7 members to enlist, entering the military in December 2022. He was also the first to be discharged, completing his service in June 2024. That sequence made him the symbolic anchor of the entire reunion narrative, the one who went in first, came out first, and spent the longest total time on the other side of the gap between BTS as a group and BTS as 7 individuals living separate lives. Jin's amazing vocal strength and stability are described as core to BTS's success with ARIRANG, with his vocals shining particularly in ballads and emotional tracks, while during interviews, his humor and playfulness balance the group's dynamic perfectly. The pairing of those two qualities, vocal stability and humor, is not incidental to who Jin is as a performer. It is the specific combination that makes him the member most responsible for the emotional temperature of a BTS concert at any given moment. When the show needs to land a ballad that makes 60,000 people stand completely still, Jin's voice is the instrument doing that work. When the show needs to break the tension afterward and remind the crowd that these are 7 people who genuinely enjoy each other's company, Jin's instinct for comedic timing does that work instead. At the heart of BTS's comeback was a free public concert in Seoul on the 21st of March, 2026, for their most dedicated fans. While only 22,000 received the golden ticket to attend, the event was expected to attract as many as 260,000 fans, making it the largest ever public concert in South Korea. Jin performed at that concert having been out of the military for less than 2 years, having spent that interval recording an album, preparing a world tour setlist, and resynchronizing with 6 other people whose individual trajectories had diverged significantly during the hiatus. The logistics of that resynchronization are easy to understate. Jin's solo career before enlistment had produced the single The Astronaut, co-written with Coldplay, which he performed at the group's Busan concert in October 2022, his last public performance before enlisting. Between that moment and the March 2026 comeback concert, the world had moved considerably. For Valentine's Day 2026, BTS launched rose wall installations in Seoul, Los Angeles, and London. Those who visited received free roses containing QR codes linking to an interactive page with a curated music playlist from the members. Jin's contribution to that playlist, made public through those QR codes, became one of the early signals to ARMY of exactly which emotional register the ARIRANG era was going to operate in personal, direct, and rooted in the specific experience of time spent apart and the specific relief of coming back together. The handwritten letters sent to fans before any official announcement were consistent with that register. They were not a PR strategy dressed up as intimacy. They were the opening gesture of a group that has, across more than a decade, built its entire relationship with its audience on the premise that the communication is real. Analysts at IBK Investment and Securities noted that while Western pop artists and fans tend to maintain a conventional hierarchical relationship, K-pop idols and fans often build their relationship more as business partners. Jin has always been the member who makes that dynamic feel least like a business arrangement and most like something that actually happened between real people. The letters were his era's first proof of that. The voice doing the ballads every night is the ongoing proof of it. Number 3. The stage that performed through a storm, RM. BTS defied heavy rain to give a top-notch performance at their opening show in Goyang, South Korea on April 9, 2026. As nature aligned with their tagline to keep swimming, hooded figures ran through a downpour with a red flare cutting a jagged line through the mist. That opening image was not planned by any production team. It happened because the weather did not cooperate, and BTS performed anyway, which turned the first night of the most anticipated K-pop comeback in years into something that no director could have scripted. RM is the reason this moment belongs specifically in a conversation about leadership, creative vision, and what it actually means to build an album around a concept as structurally ambitious as ARIRANG. As the creative leader and lyricist, RM's role in designing the conceptual direction of ARIRANG is second to none. He is credited as composer and songwriter on 13 of the 14 tracks on the album. 13 out of 14. On a 14-track album assembled from the individual experiences of 7 people who spent years apart, one person had his name on the creative paperwork for all but one song. That is not a coincidence of proximity or studio availability. It reflects a deliberate decision by the group to route the album's conceptual architecture through the member who has consistently functioned as its intellectual and lyrical center across their entire career. RM's public profile during the military hiatus was notably different from some of the other members. He enlisted in December 2023, among the later members to do so, and his pre-enlistment period included the release of his second solo album, Indigo, follow-up work, sustained engagement with the visual arts community. He has been documented visiting major museums across Europe and the United States, and a pattern of public reflection on identity, language, and what it means to be a Korean artist operating at global scale. Those are not casual interests. They are the intellectual inputs that fed directly into an album named after a folk song that has served as Korea's emotional through line across 6 centuries of history. The cultural weight carried by the approximately 600-year-old Korean folk song ARIRANG alludes to BTS's commitment to composing introspective lyrics and evoking cultural depth. For RM to anchor a stadium tour album to that specific cultural reference is a choice that required confidence in the audience's willingness to engage with something that carries genuine historical freight, not as decoration, but as the actual subject matter. RM played a pivotal role in resolving creative differences among the members during the making of the album, as hinted in a Netflix documentary. That phrase, resolving creative differences, is the polite version of a dynamic that any observer of long-running creative groups will recognize immediately. 7 people who spent years developing individual artistic identities, then reassembled to make a group album with a specific conceptual thesis, are not going to agree on everything. The fact that the album exists, that it has 14 tracks and a coherent identity, and a title that lands with genuine cultural weight, is at least partially the result of RM functioning as the person in the room who could hold the creative vision steady while the disagreements worked themselves out. The stage design for the comeback concert was described by its designers as a structure that both grounds the show in the modern energy of BTS and simultaneously honors the historical and cultural significance of the venue. Designers explicitly said they did not want to build something that felt at odds with the location and simply drop a concert into the middle of one of Seoul's most sacred spaces. That design philosophy maps directly onto what RM has been articulating in interviews and public statements for years. The idea that BTS's global reach does not require the erasure of its Korean specificity, that the two things are not in tension, that the folk song and the stadium pyrotechnics and the 360-degree LED production can coexist inside the same 2.5-hour show without either element compromising the other. He wrote that argument into 13 songs. The rain on opening night in Goyang just made the argument visible. Number 2. The president who called about concert tickets, Jimin. Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, appealed to South Korea's president, Lee Jae-myung, to add more shows in her country, after local concert promoter Ocesa told her that the band's packed itinerary made adding shows unfeasible. Read that sentence again, slowly. A sitting head of state, in an official diplomatic context, contacted the leader of another sovereign nation specifically because her citizens could not get tickets to a pop concert. That is not a metaphor for cultural influence. That is cultural influence, producing a documented, verifiable, head-of-state-level diplomatic interaction, which is a thing that has happened exactly once in the history of recorded music, and it happened because of the ARIRANG World Tour. Jimin is the entry point into this story for a specific reason that goes beyond the diplomatic anecdote. Of the 7 members, Jimin has the most documented history of driving the kind of fan engagement intensity that produces outcomes like sold-out stadiums and presidential phone calls. His 2023 solo debut album, Face, made him the first Korean solo artist to debut at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 with its lead single, Like Crazy, a chart position achieved without the full BTS promotional machinery behind it, on the strength of a solo release from a member who was preparing for military enlistment. That solo chapter is critical context for understanding what Jimin brings back to the group dynamic on the ARIRANG Tour. The album announcement confirmed that ARIRANG is driven by each member's honest introspection, and that the members' solo endeavors would influence the group's artistry now that they are reunited. For Jimin, that influence is measurable. The vocal approach he developed across his solo work, more intimate, more texturally vulnerable than his earlier BTS performances, is audible in the ARIRANG album's quieter moments in ways that would not have existed if the group had simply picked up where they left off in 2022. Tickets to BTS concerts in South Korea, North America, and Europe sold out within a few hours of the pre-sale and general sale. The speed of that sellout is the data point that explains the Mexico situation. When an entire continental leg of a tour disappears in hours, the fans who missed it do not simply accept the outcome. They petition, they organize, they write to their governments. And in Mexico, apparently, enough of them did exactly that with enough collective volume that the issue traveled up the chain of communication until it reached a president who decided it was worth a diplomatic call. On the 8th of April 2026, one day before the tour even began, BTS added 3 concerts to the Latin American leg, scheduling 1 additional show each in Lima, Santiago, and Buenos Aires. The tour expanded before it started. That is how much pressure was sitting on the demand side of this equation. Jimin's specific contribution to that demand is documented through streaming numbers, chart history, and the particular intensity of fan community engagement his solo era generated. But there is a more grounded way to say it. The reason a president makes a phone call about concert tickets is because the people asking her to are not a niche group with a niche interest. They are a significant portion of a country's population who feel a genuine, sustained connection to this music and these performers. A connection that was built over years of consistent, specific, personal communication between the group and its audience. Handwritten letters were delivered to the homes of selected fans before the official comeback announcement, and the global "What is Your Love Song" campaign saw rose wall installations appear in Seoul, Los Angeles, and London, with visitors receiving free roses containing QR codes linking to member-curated playlists. That campaign reached people on the street in 3 cities on 3 continents before a single album track had been released. The fans in Mexico City who drove a presidential diplomatic call were not responding to marketing. They were responding to years of accumulated evidence that BTS, and Jimin specifically, operate with a level of sincerity toward their audience that is genuinely rare at this scale of fame. The president's phone call was the political system briefly acknowledging something the music industry had already known for a decade. Number 1. The comeback that generated $168 million in one night v. According to BBC, fans who paid to watch the live video stream of the BTS ARIRANG Tour opening concert generated $168 million USD in sales from that single night alone, one night. 1 stadium in Goyang, South Korea. 1 live stream on Weverse. $168 million. To put that number in context, the average annual revenue of a mid-sized professional sports franchise sits in that range. BTS generated it in approximately 2.5 hours on a rainy Thursday night in April, while performing through weather that would have shut down lesser productions entirely. V is the member whose specific contribution to this moment illuminates something about the ARIRANG era that the revenue figure alone cannot capture, because what V brought back to this tour is not primarily a vocal performance or a choreographic role. It is a visual and artistic sensibility that operates at a level of cultural sophistication that changes the entire register of everything it touches. V's amazing artistic tone and experimental style helped the album maintain true to its cultural roots while still including a modern concept, and his colorful vocal tones help shape the emotional depth in certain tracks. The phrase artistic tone is doing specific work there. V spent his military hiatus in a way that was distinctly different from most of the other members. His public engagement during that period was heavily oriented toward visual art, photography, and film. He has documented museum visits, artistic collaborations, and a sustained interest in aesthetic production that extends well beyond music. That background fed directly into the visual identity of the ARIRANG album era. The stage design was inspired by the concept of a picture frame, a structure that both grounds the show in the modern energy of BTS and simultaneously honors the historical and cultural significance of the venue. V's artistic instincts are consistent with exactly that framing. He has spoken publicly across his career about the relationship between music and visual art, about performance as an aesthetic object rather than simply an entertainment product. On a tour where the stage is a picture frame and the production is designed by specialists who have worked on the Super Bowl halftime show and the Oscars, having a member whose primary offstage intellectual pursuit is the visual arts is not incidental. It shapes how the collective approaches every decision about what the show looks like, not just what it sounds like. More than 4 million viewers tuned into the opening night show via the platform's live stream, with online data reporting figures even higher in the range of 5 to 7 million. Those viewers were distributed across every time zone on Earth simultaneously, watching a live event happening in real time in a single stadium in South Korea. The infrastructure required to deliver that experience technically, logistically, financially is a consequence of a decade of relationship building between BTS and a global audience that decided this group was worth paying attention to across multiple years, multiple albums, multiple member enlistments, and a global pandemic that canceled their 2020 World Tour entirely. Industry projections estimate the ARIRANG Tour to generate over $1 billion in revenue from concerts, merchandise, licensing, streaming, and album sales, an extraordinary leap from the $246 million earned during their previous tour. The gap between $246 million and $1 billion is not explained by ticket price inflation or venue size alone. It is explained by 4 years of absence, producing a level of accumulated anticipation that converted into purchasing behavior at a scale the industry had not previously measured for a K-pop act. ARIRANG had over 4 million pre-orders before its release date, with cumulative sales expected to reach approximately 6 million copies. V's face is on that album artwork. His vocal texture is threaded through its emotional architecture. His artistic sensibility is embedded in the visual language of a campaign that placed cryptic posters on city walls, sent handwritten letters to fan homes, and built flower installations in 3 cities before releasing a single note of music. The $168 million generated in one night is the revenue number. What V represents in the context of that number is the argument that the most commercially powerful thing a group of artists can do is spend a decade being exactly, consistently, unapologetically themselves and then come back after 4 years away and prove that none of that changed. The stadiums are full because people believe it. The live stream generated $168 million because people believe it from the other side of the planet too. That is not a marketing outcome. That is what trust looks like when it scales.